Sketch a graph of y is equal to x squared minus x minus 6. Now, the first thing to realise, when you're sketching a graph of quadratic, you're actually just getting the sort of general shape. So please note, a sketch is not an accurate plot. What it is the general shape of the graph, and normally you tend to find where the curve cuts the axis. Now, if we look at the x-axis, the y-coordinate along any point on the x-axis will be equal to 0. So if we put x squared minus x minus 6 is equal to 0, then we solve that. Now, there are different ways of solving this, but if we use product sum factors, so the product will be 1 times minus 6, which is minus 6. So it's 1 times minus 6, and then the sum will be minus 1, so the sum will be minus 1, and then we want two numbers. When you multiply them together, you get minus 6, and then when you add the same two numbers, you get minus 1. You come up with minus 3 times 2, which is minus 6, and if you add minus 3 plus 2, you get minus 1. You write down the quadratic, so x squared, and you split the middle term up into minus 3x plus 2x, and you've got minus 6 is equal to 0. Look, you haven't changed the meaning, because minus 3x plus 2x makes minus x. If you group the first two terms together, you're going to get x, and a common factor will come out of x, and leave you with x minus 3. Bring down the plus, and then you group these two terms together. There's a common factor of 2, and then you get x minus 3 is equal to 0. And then here and here will always be the same, because therefore they're now a common factor, and they can now come out with x minus 3, x plus 2 is equal to 0. So now you say either x minus 3 is equal to 0, which gives x is equal to 3, or, and then we need to plot it onto the graph. Okay, so just because it's a sketch, we're not putting any other numbers on the graph except this one and the other one we're going to get. So at this point here, we're going to put 3, and then or x plus 2 is equal to 0, which gives x is minus 2. So we're going to put that so the graph roughly looks right. So this distance is slightly less than this distance. Okay, for the y-axis, the x-coordinate is equal to 0. So if we put x is 0 into this, you're just going to get minus 6. Okay, so normally you're going to get the number on the end. Now, the y-axis does not have to be the same scale as the x-axis, so we're just going to put here a number minus 6 lower down. Now, the good thing about quadratics is that they are symmetrical about a midpoint. So halfway between minus 2 and 3 is going to be this point here. So that will be, that's a width of 5. Half of 5 is 2.5, and therefore x is equal to a half. You're going to get the point where the curve is a minimum point. So now, if you now join up all the points, you get a nice smooth curve. So you happy face, and then label the curve at one end. So we need to note that the plus x squared, so if it's plus x squared, you're going to get what's known as a happy face. Now that completes the sketch. What comes in the next part of the video is one way of finding the coordinates of that particular point. It's not the only way, and it's not necessarily the easiest way. So, note, if we complete the square, so we've got y is equal to x squared minus x minus 6, and we take half of that point, half of the number in front of that, which is half of 1, which is going to give me a half, minus a half. We now write down that this becomes x minus a half all squared, minus 6. Now, in doing this process here, we have actually added in minus a half squared, which is 1/4. So if we've added it in here, we need to subtract it. This is why it's called completing the square. Okay, and then minus 6 minus 1/4. Well, 4 6s are 24. Minus 24. Minus 24 minus 1 is minus 25 over 4. So this becomes x minus a half squared minus 25 over 4. Now, so the minimum value that this function can take will be when this bit is equal to 0, because any other value than of x we put in here and we get a number, whether it's positive or negative, once we square it, it'll be positive. And then if we take this away, then the number is going to be bigger. So the lowest that this can ever be is 0, and that happens when x is equal to a half, i.e. what makes that equal to 0? Y will be equal to minus 25 over 4. Now, so a half minus 25 over 4 will give me the coordinates of that minimum point here. So the minimum point of the graph is going to be a half minus 25 over 4, which is this one here. Okay, and this is one use of completing the square. All right, so this has been a video to show you how to sketch a quadratic function and then use completing the square to find its minimum value. I repeat, this is not the only method of finding the minimum value and not necessarily the easiest. Okay, and normally if we're just doing a very simple sketch, we don't write down the coordinates of that point. The interesting thing is that the graph will be symmetrical about that point. Okay, I hope you've understood, and I thank you very much for watching.